Hi there, it's Llarold, and today I'm going to talk about Protection Paladins and Dragonflight. I came into this video kind of expecting to just dunk on Paladins because I know a lot of other players are, and the recent 40% buff to player health and monster damage, which was intended mostly as a nerf to healers, wound up targeting Prot Pallies much harder than any other tank. But I'm happy to say that's not what I'm going to be doing here. I think the class is going to be just fine. In fact, I think it's going to be really good in dungeons. I don't want to be just misleading or anything. It's not like amazing the #1 tank overall or anything like that. But if you're someone who likes Protection Paladins and focuses more on Mythic Plus than on rating, I think you're still in very good shape going into Dragonflight. This is about beta content at level 70. I mainly want to talk about talents and how the class plays, particularly compared to how it works in Shadowlands right now. If you'd like a pre-patch guide, I have that linked in the pinned comment. And as for a Dragonflight guide, that'll be coming once the release is much closer. So let's start by going over the differences between level 60 and level 70 Protection Paladins. As you gain another 5 points in each of the two talent trees, you gain access to some pretty good damage and defensive talents. The main one for me is Zealot's Paragon, which is a capstone talent in the class tree. It's kind of like Mad Paragon, the Shadowlands legendary, except I think it's arguably a good bit better because it applies a constant damage increase to both Hammer of Wrath and Judgment, and makes both of them extend your wings. It's only 10% more damage as opposed to the 30% more that it was for Hammer of Wrath, and it only grants an extra half a second per cast instead of a whole second, but because you cast Judgment so much more often than you cast Hammer of Wrath, I think it winds up being more value. You also get about 6 to 10 more seconds of wings uptime, which is really good. I'm pretty easily hitting 33 to 35 seconds of uptime on wings casts when I'm playing well, and considering I'm only around 65 to 70, maybe 75 seconds or so on average for a wings cooldown, that's actually really good. That puts me right around 50% wings time, which, when you consider how insanely strong the new defensive version of wings called Sentinel is, that ain't shabby, especially considering how early on we are into this expansion. In the spec tree, most of what you get in the next 10 levels is more passives. Damage passives, or defensive passives, or even some cooldown reduction passives, but whatever, it's mostly just passive bonuses. You can get Moment of Glory, which is an okay defensive cooldown. It's fine, it's not my favorite, but it's okay. Other than that, you keep most of the interesting powerful stuff from Shadowlands. You don't keep Venthyrs, Ash, and Hallow. That was really a huge balance problem for the entire expansion, but you do get to hang on to Divine Toll, and that's great for its amazing AoE damage, a great holy power generator, and tons of silences. Yes, even though Avenger Shield was changed, Divine Toll is still a holy power generator. Most of the time, sometimes it bugs out. You also maintain Bulwark of Righteous Fury, which is a great source of more AoE damage, and it synergizes nicely with Divine Toll. Those really are the main things. If you played Kyrian Paladin in Shadowlands, the difference between it and Dragonflight Paladin isn't huge. If you played Kyrian Paladin in Shadowlands and you played Legion Prot Paladin, you are basically ready to rock in Dragonflight. It's just about a perfect mix of the two, but there are some good new things to play around with and enjoy. The defensive cooldowns are the main highlight here, I have to say. So now let's just jump in game and play around in the level 70 talent tree. Alright, and now I am in game. As usual, I've taken 5 points out of each of the trees just to sort of make it look pretty much how I've been playing with it at level 60 in each of the two trees. In general, in both of these trees, what I'm going to be doing is making my way toward the bottom, as you can see from the blue outlines here, making my way toward the bottom and picking up some of the passives that add a lot of value. You know, Zealot's Paragon kind of overlapping with Mad Paragon, the legendary from Shadowlands, but not quite exactly. And then Bulwark of Righteous Fury just directly overlapping with the Bulwark of Righteous Fury legendary from Shadowlands. So I did make a couple of changes in the belly of the tree here. As you can see, I dropped Seasoned Warhorse, the 1 extra second of Divine Steed talent, because I mean, I can barely say the description of this talent without laughing at it, but it interacts pretty nicely with the conduit. But now that that conduit's no longer available to you, it's pretty much worthless. So you're better off coming down here and taking something that provides an absolutely tiny amount of group healing rather than the most microscopic mobility increase you could possibly get in your life. Hallowed Ground was bugged for a while, and it was giving 10% damage increase to all holy damage you dealt, and that has been nerfed recently. Not really anything you can do about it. I really like this setup here of Seal of the Crusader and Zealot's Paragon. I think I talk about it elsewhere in the video here, but Hammer of Wrath and Judgment just doing 10% more damage all the time is pretty nice. And then even though this is only half a second of extra time added onto your wings or onto your Sentinel over here per Hammer of Wrath and per Judgment, that adds up quite quickly. Like, you do get 6 to 10 more extra seconds of uptime, which when you're taking Sanctified Wrath over here, your wings now last for 25 seconds base. So you're getting 30 to 35 seconds of base uptime, which is pretty good. Lots of these talents over here, especially in the right-hand tree. You'll note that I dropped Inspiring Vanguard here, which gives you more Grand Crusader chance, which is good. It certainly helps with your Holy Power generation. I found that I didn't really need it that much, and Avenger's Shield giving you 10% block chances, a pretty good defensive layer. You know, an extra 10% block chance at the start of an expansion is pretty nice. So for Mythic Plus, I don't think that this is like a hardcore must-have, but it's really inexpensive and a pretty good little bit of extra defense. So if I have to make that choice between these two here, and you do have to spend some points up in this area just to get down the tree further, this is a pretty good one. Neither of these talents is all that bad, though. There's kind of a weird design going on with this tree where it is symmetrical in a way that's like maybe aesthetically pleasing, but you have like these talents here, Bulwark of Order, which gives you some shielding based off of your Avenger shield damage, and Light of the Titans, which gives you basically like 50% extra healing as a big, long, hot whenever you Word of Glory. Technically, it doesn't have to be on yourself. It does apply to anybody that you Word of Glory, but you know, generally you're going to be throwing those on yourself. But basically like 50% more extra value out of your Word of Glory for 2 points. 50% shielding out of your Avenger shield for 2 points. Like, these aren't bad. Then the talent below them, directly below them, is a 1-pointer, and then down into the outside it's like a 2-pointer. 2-pointer is quite a bit more powerful than the 1-pointer in both of these cases. You know, this is 3% haste. Doesn't really add up to all that much. Over here, this is the ability to heal other people with Word of Glory more efficiently. Like, can be useful in Mythic Plus, can be useful in some situations, but it's definitely a case of you have enough defense going on that you are able to like spare some for other people. Generally not how you approach tanking early on in an expansion. Over here, it's just like damage, just flat AoE damage, which adds up really quickly in AoE, but obviously isn't that valuable in single target. And then over here, it's basically just a little bit more AoE damage and a little bit more self-healing. It's a bit of a logjam right in the middle of the tree here, and the issue I have with it is Bastion of Light over here, incredibly valuable cooldown, gives you really good Shield of the Righteous uptime for free at the start of pulls. Just really helps with resource generation to start out a pull. Guardian of Ancient Kings, critical talent, gotta have it. You know, it's your main shield wall. Of course you're taking this. And then Crusader's Judgment, great for your rotation. Massively increases your ability to deal damage and generate resources. So of course you want these three. You kind of want these two up here. I mean, this one you certainly do want. This one you can go either way. These in this area, not Sentinel, this is a great talent, but the two talents on either side, they're kind of mid, and you have no choice but to take them to get down to this really, really high value. That's a bit of a bummer. Another problem that I think really gets like highlighted very nicely with a lot of these bottom of the tree traits is this whole tree is really built for AoE. Divine Toll, excellent in 5+ targets. You know, it's you press it, you get 5 holy power, you do 5 Avenger shields all that stuff. It synergizes with everything else that Avenger Shield does. It synergizes with Bulwark of Order, synergizes with Tyr's Enforcer, synergizes over here with Strength and Adversity for 2% parry hit by each of the Avenger Shields. So if it's 5 targets, 10% parry. Pretty great. You have Moment of Glory over here as a shield that just shields you for 20% of all the damage you deal. It makes your Avenger Shield do 20% more damage and makes it basically available as like a spammable skill, although you still want to be generating resource over, Holy Power over just simply spamming Avenger Shield, but being able to weave in Avenger Shield as like your every filler spell GCD would be Avenger Shield instead of something else. That's okay. I think this is certainly a talent that they've improved upon a lot throughout the beta that has kind of gone, under praised. But all of this stuff is oriented towards AoE. Bulwark of Righteous Fury works basically only in AoE. I mean, 30% more Shield of the Righteous damage on average in single target, pretty minor. But 150% more damage on your Shield of the Righteous is pretty great in AoE. Some of these talents down here, Quicken Invocations, for example, even Moment of Glory, these can be a bit more optional. Like, you could drop Moment of Glory. It is mostly just a defensive cooldown, and take Final Stand if you prefer. That's very, very doable as something you could use in Mythic Plus. I have seen a couple of other talents get some praise, specifically over here, Resolute Defender in conjunction with improved Ardent Defender, and I think this is like interesting, but I think it's a little bit of a trap. Thanks to Unbreakable Spirit over here in the left tree, you have 30% cooldown reduction on Ardent Defender. So you're already going, just to start out, from a 2-minute cooldown to let's just press it and take a look. Yeah, 85-second cooldown, which is great for how strong Ardent Defender is. 85 seconds, that's pretty fantastic. So there's sort of a design conception over here where Righteous Protector, every time you Shield of the Righteous, you're getting 3 seconds off of Wings and 3 seconds off of Guardian of Ancient Kings. That's pretty amazing. Same goes for like when you cast Word of Glory, 3 seconds off. Pretty great. Massively increases the availability of those cooldowns. Reduces their cooldowns by like 75 to, let's say about half. Let's say about 50% cooldown reduction on those, which is great. And this sort of looks like it does the same thing if you just mouse over it and don't really like read it clearly. It takes 1 extra second off for every 3 holy power you spend. And unlike Righteous Protector over here, when you get a free Shield of the Righteous or Word of Glory, Word of Glory being free from Shining Light, or Shield of the Righteous being free from Divine Purpose over here, those actually still work with Righteous Protector. They don't work with Resolute Defender. Resolute Defender is very specific. Each 3 holy power you spend. So they have to actually have a cost associated with them. So because of that, you're basically only getting 18 to 20 seconds of cooldown reduction off of Ardent Defender. So you're taking an 85-second cooldown down to a 65 to 70-second cooldown. That's not great. It does have some okay synergy here with improved Ardent Defender, but I'm not crazy about it. You can take Blessing of Spellwarding. I think this is a talent that's pretty good to have, but the opportunity cost of giving up something like Moment of Glory or even the cooldown reduction of Quicken Invocations is a little questionable. Certainly giving up like Barricade of Faith, just a constant 10% parry chance, is, I don't know that I would be willing to do that. Over here in the left tree, I think you're pretty much locked into wanting to go with Sanctified Wrath and Zealot's Paragon. These are both pretty great passive bonuses that just directly reward you for playing your rotation in the way that you would want to. There are a couple of talents over here that are pretty low impact, things like Golden Path, very limited amount of healing over time. Judgment of Light, very small trickle of healing into your group. Incandescence, same sort of thing, very small chance to deal a little bit of extra holy damage just over time. You know, these are pretty low value talents. Again, Blessing of Freedom up here, you know, it's really good if you need to remove a slow, but then anytime where you don't, it has no value. Retribution and Crusader Aura. I mean, Crusader Aura is never useful unless you're riding around on a mount. Retribution Aura is basically only useful if somebody else is already providing Devo Aura for the group. So in Mythic Plus, you're usually not running multiple Pallies, so you probably wouldn't be running this. Now let's take a look at some of the raid talent setups, and I actually have 3 of them. I have a damage one, and then I have what I consider like a primary main defensive setup, and then sort of a weird alternate defensive setup. So let's run through these maybe a little bit quicker. For raid damage, I'm kind of the mindset that you're probably never going to need Blessing of Freedom. You're probably not going to need that extra second of Divine Steed uptime. For damage, you probably are going to try to bully one of your Holy Pallies into running Devotion Aura so that you can run Ret Aura. I'm willing to come over here and take this like 1 point in Judgment of Light, but I'm not going to be doing anything with Golden Path, I think, in this situation. And here we have like our first actual meaningful talent difference in the left-hand tree is Recompense. It turns your Blessing of Sacrifice from being, you know, a useful external cooldown that you can throw onto people into a useful external cooldown that you can throw onto people to get more damage for yourself. Make it nice and selfish. That's perfect. That's exactly how you want it to be. Really leans into the whole Prot Pally doing like lots of damage sort of thing. And then again, you're still sticking with these talents down here, Seal of Might and Seal of Alacrity, just to give you more damage in your wings, and you're trying to do everything you can to maximize your wings uptime, which with this whole setup, rockin' and Zealot's Paragon, same deal, maximizing your wings damage. If for single target, you can come over here and you can take Focused Enmity to get double Avenger Shield damage. It'll only hit 1 target, but single target, that's fine. This whole setup is oriented, you know, really about just blasting as hard as you possibly can during wings, and ideally having like 50% or better wings uptime, which is pretty doable. You also are taking the real wings, 20% more crit chance instead of Sentinel. There are some things you could move around, like Bulwark of Righteous Fury, especially in single target. It's pretty minor, but you know, if you're going all out DPS, even those minor little DPS increases you want to take, that's why I'm over here in Consecration and Flame, just to have even just a little bit more consecration damage. It will eventually add up. And even with this whole setup, this was the one that I used to see, like, can I maintain Shield of the Righteous indefinitely? You know, this was like the first one that I tested. And even playing like super selfish, super offensive, all of that, I had no problem maintaining Shield of the Righteous. Now, if I had come over here and I had switched to Seraphim, which, you know, eats some of the holy power that you would use on Shield of the Righteous, it also eats a lot of wings uptime. I think in that case, you probably wouldn't be able to maintain Shield of the Righteous permanently. I think it might be at least a lot tighter. I also just don't think that Seraphim's all that good anymore. You know, you have the option of either maintaining wings at a very high uptime or being able to layer Seraphim and wings at the same time and have these huge burst periods, but then lots of weakness in between. That is maybe a possibility, but I think it's probably not going to be something that people are going to be playing in the first raid tier at least. Now let's take a look at the defensive setup, and this is one that I think is maybe a little more interesting, maybe a little more annoying too. You'll note that I've come over here in the left tree and I've dropped this 2 set of points out of Seal of Might, the 8% mastery during Avenging Wrath, which I have to admit I kind of like, but you know, it's just stat budget. And I've come over here to get Blessed Hammer grants you 2% strength for 6 seconds. Multiple applications can overlap. So it's sort of like a Bear Druid's Iron Fur where they don't extend the duration, they just overlap. And I don't think they even need to hit anything. Like, let's just see. Oh, I guess they do. Well, whatever. In any case, being able to maintain this buff, you know, it's like a little bit of a strength buff. It's actually pretty decent. It might be just better to go through this than to go for Seal of Might. What is like numerically better but kind of annoying is playing Of Dusk and Dawn correctly. Whenever you hit 5 Holy Power, you get Blessing of Dawn for 15 seconds. When you hit 0 Holy Power, you gain Blessing of Dusk for 15 seconds. So I'm going to fly over to a training dummy just to kind of show off here. All right, here we are at a training dummy. Boom, I just hit 5 Holy Power. Now I have Blessing of Dawn. I Shield of the Righteous. I generate one more. Shield of the Righteous again. Now I'm in Blessing of Dusk. And that's basically the playstyle that it creates. It creates this approach where you have to hit 5, then you dump 1, you generate back up only to 3, then you dump out to 0, and you do that like sort of repeatedly as a way to maintain both of these buffs all the time. It doesn't really make sense, like, conceptually, that you're somehow both in Dusk and Dawn at the same time. That is something that definitely is a little strange to me. I have played around with this talent right underneath it, Seal of Order, in the Dawn. So after you've hit 5 Holy Power and you have that damage buff going, you do 10% more damage and healing with your Holy Power spending ability. So 10% more Word of Glory healing, 10% more Shield of the Righteous damage. That's really all that is. In Dusk, your armor is up by 10%. That's about 1.5 to 2% more physical damage reduction, which is okay. It's the exact same as this talent over here, Face Armor, 10% more armor from your Shield of the Righteous. Both of those stacked together, they're about 3.5 to 4% more damage reduction. Again, just from physical sources. Okay, but pretty expensive, to get less than 2% damage reduction against physical only from a whole talent point that's this deep into the tree. You also get 10% faster cooldown reduction or cooldown on your Judgment, your Blessed Hammer, and I guess that's it, because those are your only Holy Power generating abilities anymore. I played around with this. I actually liked it. It really did feel nice to have Judgment available all the time. But compared to having, 5 extra seconds of uptime or base uptime on Sentinel / Avenging Wrath, to have the extra Holy Power per Judgment during Avenging Wrath and Sentinel, or, to have the extra uptime, even more time, like 6 to 8 more seconds of Sentinel and Avenging Wrath uptime out of Zealot's Paragon, and then just a permanent 10% more Hammer of Wrath and Judgment damage. Like, these two absolutely destroy Seal of Order, in my experience so far. And also, playing of Dusk and Dawn, kind of annoying to do. It works okay, but it is annoying to, it's just said like an extra little bit of something you have to keep in your mind all the time. Oh, I can't just be generating and consuming the Holy Power. I have to specifically be hitting 5 and then going down to 0 and then back up to 5. It's a little under rewarding for the annoying maintenance buff hair that you're having to take care of. So I think that like skipping that and going through just an entirely different approach, like even just taking Touch of Light and just sticking to Seal of Might, totally would work as well if you find this annoying at all. But technically speaking, 4% more damage reduction is just kind of a not that difficult maintenance buff. It's okay. Of course, right over here, Sanctuary, 5% more damage reduction while you're in Consecration. That's a much easier maintenance buff, and it's just straight up stronger. And it's all the way up here, as opposed to this, that's all the way down here. There is one other talent that I want to point out just because it is so baffling to me. Barricade of Faith, I already mentioned. Avenger's Shield, you use usually less than every 10 seconds, and you get 10% block from it. 1 point. Pretty good talent. Thumbs up. And then down here you have Faith in the Light. Word of Glory gives you 5% block chance for 5 seconds, and if we dump a couple of points into it, it goes to 10% block, still for 5 seconds. And Word of Glory is something that you are not casting nearly as often as Avenger's Shield. You're maybe casting it every 15 seconds or so. And yet it's this deep in the tree. It truly is baffling how underwhelming, like undertuned this talent is when compared to this talent way up here. Very similar to the situation of Dusk and Dawn and say Sanctuary over here. Now, to be able to get the points to come over and take Sanctuary, which I really do like, Improved Holy Shield is also an option if you're taking quite a lot of spell damage, but I think generally I would rather have the overall damage reduction than a little bit higher chance to block spell damage. I think I would rather just have the steady, consistent damage reduction of Sanctuary in this case. You do have to come through Consecrated Ground, which helps a little bit with staying in Consecration. I think it's okay in Mythic Plus, you know, if this is a route that you would want to take, you don't mind giving up that damage from Tears Enforcer and maybe from Strength of Conviction, although losing the healing from Strength of Conviction can be a little tough. The damage is not that big of a deal in sort of smaller pulls and more single target situations. But yeah, having the slow from Consecrated Ground is pretty nice. I think getting, a minute or less than a minute off of Lay on Hands as cooldown is not that big of a deal. You know, it's not like you're spamming Lay on Hands on cooldown in raids. That's not realistic. I really want to point out how amazingly strong Sentinel is, and I want to say that they have fixed the interaction it has with Righteous Protector and Zealot's Paragon. Zealot's Paragon works with it now, it extends it correctly. Righteous Protector works with it now, it reduces its cooldown, which means that Paladin has a cooldown that makes you do 20% more damage, capable of casting Hammer of Wrath, makes your Judgment generate an extra holy power. It gives you 30% damage reduction and 30% more health. It will eventually decay stacks, but usually by the time that I have run it out all the way out to the 35-second max duration, I'm at maybe 5 or 6 stacks left, which is still 10% more health, 10% more damage reduction. And it's on a minute to minute and 10-second cooldown. It's actually pretty crazy. I really underestimated just how good this talent was, in part because until this last week, we weren't able to interact with it and Righteous Protector overlapping. So, having had that chance now, I think that Pally is it is kind of reliant on this, and then using things like Moment of Glory or Final Stand or whatever to kind of fill in some of the gaps in between. But I think this is one of the best talents in any of the tank trees. I've been pretty impressed by it. So this is, like I said, this is sort of the raid defensive primary setup. You'll note I haven't taken Bulwark of Righteous Fury. It's 3 damage that I'm leaving on the table to be able to pick up things more like Moment of Glory, Sanctuary. Hand of the Protector really is just here for pathing. I kind of could justify dropping Divine Toll. In single target, I think I would. I think I literally would drop Divine Toll and go with something more like this. And now let's take a look at the raid defensive alternate setup, which is completely divested out of this Zealot's Paragon. I am going for something that is way more about consistent defensive value, Seal of Clarity all the way over here on the left, trying to get as much holy power cost reduction as you can. I think this talent's kind of bad. I think the proc chance on it is pretty low. 10% chance to reduce the holy power cost of your next Word of Glory or Shield of the Righteous by 1. Pretty low value. But if you really, really desperately needed to Word of Glory a whole bunch just to save your bacon, I think that this could work. It could give you more holy power available to cast more Words of Glory. If you really wanted to maximize your personal Word of Glory value rather than being able to throw them out onto teammates and stuff, again, I think you would come up here and you would do this. You would slide around the outside of Hand of the Protector to get Strength of Conviction. Gotta have that Crusader's Judgment, gotta have that Bastion of Light and Guardian of Ancient Kings, of course. Eye of Tyr, excellent Covenant ability from Legion that they brought, or artifact weapon ability that they brought back from Legion. Love to see it, missed it, it's great. And Moment of Glory, not my favorite, but, a defensive cooldown is a defensive cooldown. I'm not gonna say no to a little bit more extra defensive value when I'm running a super defensive setup. And again, here we've got Faith's Armor and Seal of Order working together to give you as much consistent resource generation as you can get at all times, as much armor as you can get at all times, more self-healing out of Strength of Conviction, and then the Dawn aspect of Seal of Order here. Still not going to be a huge amount of self-healing, but you know, Light of the Titans, Strength of Conviction, all of that. Doing the best you can. I think it can work reasonably well as a pretty defensive setup. And then, of course, important to remember always, pure single target, switch to Focused Enmity, and then as soon as you're out of it, you switch back to Soaring Shield. In terms of Prot Paladin's playstyle, it's fairly straightforward. It has a moderate amount of keybinds, a decent sized collection of cooldowns that are all pretty powerful. It has some really amazing group utility in the form of Blessing of Sacrifice, Bop, Spellwarding, and of course, all the billions and billions of silences you're going to put out with Avenger's Shield. You have slightly better crowd control availability now too, since you're able to take Fist of Justice and Blinding Light at the same time now. That's pretty neat. I didn't mention healing. You technically still have it. Probably the most important thing that I have found in spending more time on Paladin is that the Shield of the Righteous uptime is totally fine. There was a conception at the start of the alpha and beta among players that changing Avenger's Shield to no longer generate holy power would ruin Paladins and Shield of the Righteous uptime would be low and you'd just be dead all the time and the sky would be falling, Pally's dead. Thankfully, that's not true at all. You do need to spec into talents that improve your resource generation, but that's always been true for every spec, and the talents Pallies have right now that do that are extremely strong. So, who's complaining? With only 20% haste or so, I can very easily maintain permanent Shield of the Righteous uptime on a single training dummy for 5 minutes straight. So I think Pally's defenses are totally fine, still doing great. Right now I think of Protection Paladin as a class that kind of has a defensive cooldown rolling most of the time. Between Eye of Tyr, Sentinel, Ardent Defender, and even Moment of Glory, you are able to legitimately have like 95% uptime on one of those defensive cooldowns. And that's not even counting Final Stand or Guardian of Ancient Kings. This was a playstyle that I used on Vengeance Demon Hunter in Shadowlands, and I loved playing it. Now let's talk about how good Pally is or isn't. I think Paladin will be stronger and more fun in Mythic Plus than it was in most of Shadowlands. In raids I still think it's okay. It's not blowing everyone's minds with its tankiness like Warrior and DHR right now, and it's not a super damage tank like it was during the high points of Sanctum of Domination either. It's more of a classic defensive tank that has some good burst damage potential during cooldowns, but nothing insanely face-melting like it was as Venthyr. The thing with Pally being a tank that relies on rolling defensive cooldowns is that when you compare that to the Demon Hunter design of Shadowlands, DH suffered from being brutally squishy without their cooldowns. Like, yeah, basically like a mage without cooldowns rolling, and then it was really tanky with them. They had massive amounts of their defensive power tied into their defensive cooldowns. This made it really unforgiving. Pally is, fortunately, kind of the opposite. You have about as much damage reduction from armor on a Paladin just standing around in Orgrimmar AFK as a Demon Hunter does with Demon Spikes, right around 45%. No frailty stacks, but still, that's a pretty good baseline that Pally's at. Shield of the Righteous is still a pretty strong strength to armor conversion, and the uptime is, if you're playing well, 100%. You have higher block chance already in Dragonflight than you did for most of Shadowlands, and you have a lot of flexibility defensively. There's really only one problem with the class in my eyes, and that's the self-healing. Blizzard's recent nerf to healing values was pretty rough on Prot Pallies, and your self-healing as a Prot Pally is not great. Word of Glory is still a good on-demand self-heal in emergencies, and thanks to the change to Shining Light, you will have Word of Glory available a little more frequently than you did during Shadowlands. 3 is a better number than 5 anyways. But the base coefficient for Word of Glory could probably stand to get a buff. Word of Glory is still decent as a self-heal. It's it's fine, but with it being on the GCD, it's pretty annoying that it isn't a giant heal. 25% of your max health just doesn't really feel like enough for it to cost a GCD. I'm pleasantly surprised by the state of Protection Paladins going into Dragonflight. Pally has great defensive cooldowns, and it has a lot of them. Pally seems like it's going to be better in Mythic Plus than it is in Raids, which is pretty normal for the class. Talents like Divine Toll, Strength in Adversity, and Barricade of Faith are all pretty unremarkable in single target, but provide a ton of value in AoE. In Raids, the toolkit seems a little weaker, but you still have some great group utility like Spellwarding, Bop, and Final Stand, which makes them unique among tanks. I think you can still play Paladin as a super damage tank in Raids and do fine, but a lot of the good mid-level talents are oriented more towards AoE. So for single target fights, you may need to play a little more conservatively in Raids to stay safe than you would in Mythic Plus, where the toolkit gives you a lot more defensive value just by having more targets around you. Even if nothing changes from now until release, I think Pally is fine. I think it's solid. Their healing probably needs a buff, but the defensive cooldowns and the offensive aspects of the kit are good. Pally took me quite a lot longer to figure out than some of the other tanks, I have to admit, but now that I have a good handle on the state of the class, I'm back on board. I like it. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.